My father sent a message. We've chosen to sever all contact. Stay away from us forever. My sister liked the text. I replied, I'll remove my name from every loan tomorrow. By midnight, the family chat was erupting with capitalized yelling. At 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday, the notification arrived, a cold digital chime cutting through the quiet of my office. I was deep in quarterly reports when my phone buzzed with Dad's message. 23 words, a venomous dart aimed to shatter me. But the real blow? Rachel's little thumbs-up emoji, appearing just 3 seconds later. My younger sister, perpetually his favorite, her endorsement of my exile felt like a deeply personal betrayal, unexpected and sharp. My fingers moved on instinct. A furious reply launched into the digital void before my brain could catch up. Then, phone silenced, I slid it into my desk drawer. The Peterson account, I reasoned, demanded my attention far more than any impending family meltdown. Around 11 p.m., curiosity gnawed at me. I retrieved my phone to find a staggering 247 unread messages in the family group chat. Dad's name screamed repeatedly in all caps. Rachel had unleashed approximately 40 frantic texts, each more hysterical than the last. Even Mom, who barely mastered the crying face emoji, had penned several desperate paragraphs, begging me to reconsider. Uncle Jerry's voice cut through the digital noise. Now hold on just a damn minute. Aunt Patricia chimed in, what loans? Cousin Brandon's message simply read, this is wild, LOL. I poured myself a steadying glass of wine and began to scroll, starting from the very beginning. The truth began when I was just 11. Dad had called me aside one evening after dinner, his expression serious in a way that always tightened my stomach. He praised my maturity, my responsibility, my trustworthiness. Then he asked if I would help the family by letting him use my name and social security number for financial matters. He promised it was temporary, just until his credit rebounded from a bad business deal. What does an 11-year-old comprehend about credit scores or legal liability? I simply wanted to make my father proud, to embody the responsible daughter he claimed I was. His requests continued through middle school, a credit card application here, a small personal loan there. Dad always had an explanation. He was rebuilding, things were tight, the family needed this. By my 16th birthday, 7 accounts bore my name. By 18, that number had doubled, including a repossessed truck, a ghost that would later haunt my college financial aid applications. Rachel, meanwhile, enjoyed a carefree childhood. She attended sleepovers, joined the soccer team. No one ever pulled her aside for those grave conversations. She remained golden, untouched, while I carried secrets that grew heavier with each passing year. College should have been my escape, but the financial aid office had questions about my credit history. Apparently, a 17-year-old shouldn't carry $43,000 in existing debt. The counselor's confusion morphed into pity as I struggled to explain charges from furniture stores and car dealerships I'd never visited. A repossessed vehicle, a truck I'd never even seen, was listed on my report. I took out legitimate loans, actual ones I understood and agreed to, and worked 3 jobs to cover what aid didn't. Dad had promised to help with tuition. That help never materialized, only more explanations. The economy was tough, his business struggling. Surely, I understood family came first? After graduation, I landed a position at Morrison & Fletcher, a mid-sized consulting firm in Chicago. The salary was decent, enough to finally build a life. I rented a studio in an up-and-coming neighborhood code for affordable, if you didn't mind hearing your neighbors' entire lives through the walls. Meanwhile, Rachel married Connor, manager of his parents' restaurant chain. My parents doted on him, posting endless photos of lavish family dinners. No one ever mentioned I wasn't invited. When I once asked Mom, she grew vague, citing limited seating. Last year, Dad called with another opportunity. He was buying a rental property, a real investment for the family. The bank needed a cosigner with a strong employment history. Would I help just this once? He'd been making payments on everything else reliably. Hadn't he proven himself trustworthy? I was 28, still sleeping on a mattress on the floor because furniture felt too permanent with debt collectors calling monthly. But he was my father. Family loyalty had been ingrained in me since childhood. I signed. 6 months later, he bought a boat. He posted pictures on Facebook with the caption, "Dreams do come true." Rachel commented with a string of celebration emojis. Mom shared it, adding, "So proud of my husband." I, meanwhile, had been eating rice and beans for 2 weeks straight just to make my rent payment. The mortgage went into default 4 months ago. The bank started calling me at work, a detail my boss definitely noticed. The professional image I'd meticulously constructed was crumbling, all because my father wanted waterfront property and jet skis. I hired a lawyer, spending money I didn't have on a consultation. She reviewed everything, her eyes widening with each document. The credit cards, the personal loans, the car note for a truck I'd never driven, the defaulted rental property mortgage. My credit score was 494. I couldn't even get approved for a store credit card. "This is financial abuse," she stated, not mincing words. "You were a child when this started. We can pursue legal action." The thought of suing my own father made me nauseous. But the thought of living like this forever felt worse. I started documenting everything, gathering statements and correspondence. Years of temporary help crystallized into a clear pattern of exploitation. My lawyer prepared a case. Before filing, she suggested one last chance to make things right. I drove home for Thanksgiving, my stomach churning the entire 4 hours. Pumpkin pie tasted like ash. I laid it out calmly. I needed to be removed from every account. I needed written repayment plans. This had to end. Dad's face turned purple. He called me ungrateful, selfish, a traitor to the family. Didn't I understand everything he'd sacrificed for me? Didn't I care how hard things had been for him? Rachel jumped in on cue, claiming I'd always been dramatic and jealous of her relationship with Dad. Mom cried, saying I was breaking her heart by bringing up legal threats during the holidays. Connor, bless him, just sat there, looking uncomfortable, eating sweet potatoes. I left before dessert, driving back to Chicago through a snowstorm, tears blurring my vision as much as the weather. The next few months were a cold silence. They removed me from the family group chat. My birthday came and went without acknowledgement. Fine. I threw myself into work, earned a promotion, and started seeing a therapist. She helped me understand that love shouldn't come with interest rates attached. Then came Dad's message on that Tuesday afternoon. The official disownment, validated by Rachel's endorsement. Something clicked. Maybe it was therapy. Maybe it was exhaustion from carrying guilt that was never mine. Or maybe I just finally had enough. I called my lawyer that evening after scrolling through the family chat explosion. File everything, I told her. She didn't ask if I was sure. She'd been waiting for this. The next morning, I began reporting the fraud to the credit bureaus. Every account opened while I was a minor. Every loan I never applied for, including that repossessed truck from when I was 16. The documentation I'd gathered made it straightforward. Forged signatures, applications listing my age as 18 when I was 12, addresses I'd never lived at. Walking into the bank felt surreal. The representative, Jennifer, with kind eyes and sensible heels, listened to my entire story without interruption. When I finished, she slid a box of tissues across her desk, though I wasn't crying yet. "How long has this been happening?" she asked gently. 17 years. Her expression shifted to that familiar mix of shock and pity that always made me want to disappear. But she recovered quickly, pulling up my accounts. The list seemed endless as she scrolled. Each line item represented another lie, another manipulation, another moment when my father chose his wants over my future. "We see this more often than you'd think," Jennifer said, typing notes. Parents who justify it as temporary, who tell themselves they're not really hurting anyone. But this, she gestured at the screen, this is extensive, systematic. The word hit me differently. Systematic implied planning, intention, a deliberate pattern, not desperate mistakes. My father hadn't stumbled into ruining my credit. He had constructed an entire scheme around it. Jennifer helped me file fraud reports for each account. The process took 4 hours. By the end, my hand cramped from signing affidavits, and my head pounded from reliving each financial violation in clinical detail. But there was something cathartic about it, too, about finally naming what had been done to me instead of making excuses. What happens to them? I asked as we wrapped up. My parents, I mean. Jennifer's expression went carefully neutral, the professional mask of someone who'd answered this before. That depends on several factors: the amount involved, whether they cooperate, if they have prior history. The bank will investigate, and if the fraud is confirmed, they could face criminal charges. At minimum, they'll be liable for the debts. Criminal charges. The word sat heavy in my chest. Despite everything, picturing my father in handcuffs felt wrong, a betrayal of something fundamental. But then I remembered being 19, sobbing in a financial aid office while a counselor asked why I had a repossessed vehicle on my credit report for a car I'd never seen. I remembered the apartments I couldn't rent, the job opportunities that required credit checks I couldn't pass, the constant anxiety of phone calls from collectors demanding payment for purchases I never made. They'd had 17 years to stop, 17 years to come clean, to fix what they'd broken. Instead, they disowned me for daring to want a life not buried under their choices. My lawyer sent formal notification to my parents. I was pursuing legal remediation for identity theft and fraud. All accounts needed to be refinanced without my name within 30 days, or we would proceed with criminal charges. My phone started ringing immediately. I sent every call to voicemail. Uncle Jerry left a message saying everyone needed to calm down and talk this through like adults. Aunt Patricia said I should be ashamed of myself. Cousin Brandon's message was surprisingly supportive. Honestly, you should have done this years ago. Rachel sent a long text about family loyalty and forgiveness, how I was destroying everything over money. She said I'd always been jealous of her bond with Dad, but now I was finally showing my true colors. I replied once, I was 11. None of this was my choice. She responded, you could have said no at any point. I blocked her number. The credit bureau's investigation took 6 weeks. One by one, accounts were flagged as fraudulent and removed from my report. My score jumped dramatically in the first month alone, climbing from 494 to 694. The relief felt physical, like I'd been holding my breath underwater for nearly 2 decades and finally broke the surface. During those 6 weeks, I started researching financial abuse. The term felt clinical, detached, yet the descriptions fit my experience with uncomfortable precision. Online forums were filled with similar stories: children whose parents stole their identities, siblings who discovered tens of thousands in debt before their 18th birthdays, families who treated their kids like renewable resources to be exploited. One woman wrote about finding out her mother had opened 14 credit cards in her name. Another described a father who'd taken out student loans, supposedly for his daughter's education, then used the money to fund his gambling habit. The daughter never saw college. The details varied, but the underlying theme remained consistent. People who should protect you sometimes become the biggest threat to your future. I joined a support group that met on Thursday evenings in a community center near my apartment. The first session, I sat in the back, silent. Just listening to others share their experiences, the guilt, the anger, the complicated grief of losing family while simultaneously being freed from them, made something loosen in my chest. A guy named Marcus talked about his uncle who'd used his social security number to open utility accounts, leaving Marcus unable to get electricity in his first apartment due to thousands in unpaid bills. Everyone told me family is family, Marcus said, his voice tired. Like, that meant I should just accept being screwed over forever. A woman named Lisa described her grandmother's manipulative tears. Whenever Lisa tried to set boundaries about money, she'd cry and say I was abandoning her, that she raised me better than this. Meanwhile, she'd taken out a car loan in Lisa's name and defaulted on it. When the facilitator asked if I wanted to share, I surprised myself by saying yes. My voice shook as I explained the situation, but nobody looked shocked or judgmental. They just nodded, understanding in a way my friends never quite could. The worst part isn't even the money, I admitted. It's that they made me feel crazy for being upset. Like wanting my own financial identity was selfish and cruel. That's called gaslighting, the facilitator said. Making you doubt your own reality so they can continue the abuse. Abuse? There was that word again. The one I'd been dancing around for months. My lawyer used it. The bank representative implied it. Now this room full of strangers who understood exactly what I'd experienced confirmed it. My father hadn't made mistakes or bad choices. He'd systematically abused my trust and legal identity for his own benefit. Dad hired a lawyer who sent threatening letters about defamation and false allegations. My lawyer sent back copies of documents with my forged signatures, dated when I was in middle school. Their lawyer stopped returning Dad's calls. After that, the rental property went into foreclosure. With my name removed, the bank came after my parents for the full amount. They'd have to sell their house to cover it. Mom called from a number I didn't recognize, sobbing about how they'd lose everything. "You've been losing my everything since I was 11, I told her, before hanging up. The boat got repossessed. Dad posted a vague status about betrayal and snakes in the grass. Rachel shared it. Several family members commented with prayer hands and supportive messages. A few others, who'd clearly figured out what was happening, stayed conspicuously silent. Uncle Jerry called from his work phone. I answered because he'd always been relatively kind to me. "Your father's been talking," he said. "Making you out to be the villain." But I did some math, kiddo. You were in 6th grade when this started. That's not borrowing. That's theft. Hearing someone from the family validate my reality made me cry harder than I had through the entire ordeal. "Your grandmother would be furious if she knew," he continued. "She always said that man had a reckless streak. I'm sorry nobody protected you." 3 months after everything went down, my credit score hit 720. I got approved for my first legitimate credit card, one I'd applied for myself with my own income verification. The limit was only $2,000, but it felt like winning the lottery. The day the card arrived in the mail, I sat on my floor and just stared at it. My name embossed on plastic, an account I'd chosen to open, a limit based on my actual income and employment history. Nobody had forged my signature or lied about my age. This was mine. Genuinely, legally, properly mine. I activated it immediately and used it to buy groceries. $43 at the store, paid off the same day through the app. Such a small transaction, but I kept checking my phone to look at the account activity. One purchase listed correctly. No mysterious charges from states I'd never visited or stores I'd never entered. Work became my refuge. During this period, Morrison and Fletcher had a major project with a healthcare company streamlining their patient intake process. I threw myself into it, working late hours, not because I had to, but because having something concrete to focus on kept my mind from spiraling. My colleague, Amanda, noticed the change. We'd worked together for 2 years, but had never been particularly close. Work friends who chatted by the coffee maker, but never made plans outside the office. One evening, as we both packed up around 8, she asked if I wanted to grab dinner. Over Thai food, she carefully asked if everything was okay. "You seem different lately," she said, more focused, but also, I don't know, like you're carrying something heavy. I hadn't planned to tell her anything, but the kindness in her voice, combined with 3 months of processing trauma, made the words spill out. I gave her the abbreviated version: family financial abuse, legal action, estrangement. Amanda listened without the typical platitudes about family forgiveness. When I finished, she shared her own story about cutting off her alcoholic brother who'd stolen from her repeatedly. "People always ask if I miss him," she said. "They expect me to say yes, to be sad about it. But honestly, I miss who I thought he was. The actual person, the one who'd lie and steal and manipulate? I don't miss that at all." Her words struck something deep. Did I miss my parents, or did I miss the fantasy of having parents who actually put my well-being first? The real people who had exploited me since childhood weren't worth mourning. Amanda and I became genuine friends after that conversation. She introduced me to her friend group, people with careers and hobbies and lives that didn't revolve around dysfunction. We started having monthly dinners, going to museums, catching movies, normal things that normal people did when they weren't drowning in fraudulent debt and family manipulation. Through Amanda, I met her friend group's financial advisor, a sharp woman named Diana, who offered to review my situation pro bono after hearing my story. She helped me create an actual budget, set up proper savings accounts, and plan for long-term financial goals. "You're starting from behind," Diana said frankly, reviewing my statements. "But you're young enough to recover completely. In 5 years, this will be a bad memory rather than your current reality." 5 years felt simultaneously too long and mercifully short. I'd already lost 17 years to my father's choices. What was 5 more to undo the damage? I started shopping for a real apartment, one with a dishwasher and enough space for actual furniture. The deposit didn't require me to eat ramen for a month. Small victories felt monumental. Work continued going well. My boss pulled me aside one day and mentioned she'd noticed a positive change in my demeanor lately. I almost laughed. Turns out, not being crushed under fraudulent debt improves your mood. Rachel sent one final message through Instagram, since I'd blocked everything else. "Dad had a heart attack. If he dies, it's on you." I felt a flicker of the old guilt, the conditioned response to take responsibility for everyone else's problems. Then I remembered being 11, signing papers I didn't understand because my father said it would help the family. I remembered choosing between groceries and minimum payments on accounts I never opened. I remembered every family gathering I wasn't invited to while they spent money that was legally mine to repay. My hands shook as I read the message. For a moment, years of conditioning screamed at me to call, to apologize, to somehow make this right. Dad could be dying and Rachel was saying it was my fault. What kind of daughter causes her father's heart attack? I called my therapist's emergency line. She called back within 20 minutes. "Tell me what you're thinking right now," Dr. Morrison said, her voice calm and grounding. That maybe I went too far. That enforcing legal consequences for fraud was too harsh. That I'm killing him. "Did you cause his heart attack?" Rachel says. I didn't ask what Rachel says. I asked if you caused his heart attack. "Did you physically do something to his heart?" "No, but the stress of facing consequences for committing fraud against his own child for 17 years, that stress," Dr. Morrison finished. Hearing it said so plainly made the absurdity clear. He made his choices. He did. And you made yours, to stop allowing yourself to be victimized. Those are very different things. We talked for 40 minutes. Dr. Morrison reminded me that guilt was a trained response, one my family had cultivated carefully over the years to keep me compliant. She asked what I'd tell a friend in this situation, what advice I'd give to someone else whose family weaponized medical emergencies to manipulate them back into an abusive dynamic. I'd tell them it's emotional blackmail, I admitted. And you'd be right. I didn't respond to Rachel's message. Instead, I texted Uncle Jerry, who confirmed within an hour that Dad was fine, a minor scare, already released from the hospital, probably brought on by his own hypertension and poor diet rather than any cosmic justice for fraud. The relief I felt knowing he was okay came with a side of shame that I doubted myself so quickly. Years of therapy, months of building boundaries, and one manipulative text had nearly sent me spiraling back into old patterns. I screenshot Rachel's message and showed it at my next support group meeting. Marcus laughed bitterly. "Oh yeah, the emergency manipulation tactic. My uncle tried that. Suddenly had a stroke right after I filed my police report. Miraculous recovery once he realized I wasn't backing down." Lisa nodded knowingly. "My grandmother called from a hospital bed, saying she was dying and needed to see me one last time. When I got there, she ambushed me with the whole family, demanding I drop the credit dispute. She's still alive, by the way. That was 3 years ago. Their stories made me feel less alone, less crazy. This wasn't unique dysfunction. It was a standard play from the abuser's handbook: create a crisis, make it about life and death, force the victim to choose between boundaries and being blamed for a family member's health. Uncle Jerry texted later that Dad was fine, a minor scare, already home from the hospital. He also mentioned Rachel was asking family members for money because Connor's restaurant was struggling and they'd been relying on Dad's financial support, which had dried up considerably. The irony wasn't lost on me. 6 months later, I signed a lease on a 2-bedroom apartment with hardwood floors and big windows that let in actual sunlight. I bought a couch, a real one, new, not from Craigslist or a curb. I hung artwork on the walls and got a cat from the shelter, a gray tabby I named Meteor. The second bedroom became my office. I bought a proper desk, an ergonomic chair, and set up a space that was entirely mine. No more working from my bed or the kitchen table. This was a room dedicated to my career, my growth, my future. Decorating the apartment felt like an act of rebellion. Every piece of furniture I chose, every paint color I selected for an accent wall, every plant I positioned by the windows, these were decisions nobody else had input on. For the first time in my life, my living space reflected my taste, my priorities, my sense of home. My neighbor across the hall, an elderly woman named Mrs. Chin, welcomed me with homemade dumplings and an invitation to join the building's book club. The normalcy of it felt surreal. No drama, no manipulation, just a kind gesture from a stranger who expected nothing in return. The book club met monthly in the community room. 8 people who genuinely enjoyed reading and discussing literature. No hidden agendas or family politics. We debated character motivations, argued about themes, recommended our favorite authors. Sometimes we went off topic and talked about our lives, but it was voluntary sharing rather than obligatory performance. One evening, after discussing a novel about fractured family relationships, a member named Helen asked if I had family in the area. The question, innocent and conversational, used to fill me with dread. What do you say? How do you explain estrangement without making it awkward? No, I said simply. Just me. Helen smiled. Well, you've got us now. That was something. These people, who gathered monthly to discuss books, had become more supportive than relatives who'd known me my entire life. They celebrated when I mentioned my promotion at work. They helped me pick out paint colors for my bedroom. When Meteor needed emergency vet care for a urinary blockage, Mrs. Chin watched him overnight while I was at work, checking on him every few hours and sending me updates. This was what community looked like when it wasn't built on obligation and guilt. People chose to show up for each other because they wanted to, not because DNA demanded it. My credit score hit 780. The car dealership approved me for a reasonable interest rate on a certified pre-owned sedan. I sat in the driver's seat of a car that was actually mine, no one else's name on the title, and cried in the parking lot. My lawyer helped me file for compensation for the years of damaged credit. The case was ongoing, but she was optimistic. Apparently, judges don't look kindly on parents who commit identity theft against their children. Mom created a new Facebook account to get around my blocks and send a friend request. I denied it. She tried messaging anyway, talking about forgiveness and moving forward. She said I was being stubborn, that family was supposed to stick together through hard times. I wanted to respond with a detailed list of every hard time I'd gone through alone while they excluded me from dinners and celebrations. I wanted to explain that I'd been sticking with family for 17 years while they treated me like an ATM with a pulse. Instead, I just blocked the new account and went about my day. My therapist said healing isn't linear, that some days would be harder than others. She was right. Sometimes I'd see a father-daughter moment in a movie and feel that ache, wondering what a healthy relationship might have looked like. Other times, I'd check my credit score and feel nothing but relief that I'd escaped. Cousin Brandon reached out to meet for coffee. He'd apparently been dealing with his own family drama. His parents expected him to give them money constantly, despite his student loans. We talked for 3 hours about boundaries and guilt, and the weird obligation we felt toward people who'd never considered our well-being. You did the right thing, he said firmly. I wish I had your courage. I thought about 11-year-old me, desperate to make her father proud, unknowingly signing away her financial future. I thought about the scared college student fielding calls from debt collectors. I thought about every version of myself that had suffered in silence because speaking up felt impossible. It wasn't courage, I told Brandon. It was just finally being more afraid of staying than leaving. A year after Dad's disownment text, I got a promotion to senior consultant. The raise meant I could start actually saving money, building an emergency fund, thinking about future investments. My retirement account was no longer a fantasy. Rachel had a baby, a boy named Mason. The family chat I was no longer part of apparently exploded with photos and excitement. Aunt Patricia accidentally sent me one message meant for the group, realized her error, and sent an awkward, "Sorry, wrong person." I felt a twinge seeing the baby photo, but not the crushing exclusion I might have experienced before. They were living their lives. I was living mine. The Venn diagram of those two circles no longer overlapped, and that was acceptable. Uncle Jerry sent Christmas cards, not to my parents' house where they'd be thrown away, but directly to my apartment. His note said, "Proud of you for choosing yourself." That's not selfish. That's survival. I put the card on my refrigerator. The legal case settled out of court. My parents agreed to pay restitution of $15,000 in monthly installments, a fraction of the actual damages. But my lawyer explained this represented compensatory damages for the years of credit destruction, lost opportunities, and legal fees. The actual fraudulent debts had been discharged through the fraud investigation process. They also had to sign a legal agreement never to use my information for financial purposes again, with significant penalties if violated. The settlement negotiations had been brutal. My father's lawyer tried every angle, claiming I'd benefited from accounts I hadn't, arguing that family members often share credit not like this, suggesting that as an adult, I could have stopped it at any point, ignoring that it started when I was 11. My lawyer demolished each argument with documentation, testimony from the bank fraud division, and expert witnesses who explained the long-term psychological and financial impact of parental financial abuse. At one point, they tried to get Rachel to testify that I'd been a willing participant, that I'd understood what I was signing. My lawyer requested her phone records showing her thumbs up on Dad's disownment text. Rachel suddenly became unavailable for testimony. The day the settlement was finalized, my lawyer took me out for coffee to celebrate. "You held firm," she said. "A lot of people cave when family starts playing the victim. You didn't." I came close to caving several times. The part of me that had been trained since childhood to prioritize family harmony screamed constantly during the process. But the louder voice, the one that had developed through therapy and support groups, and seeing my credit score rise, reminded me that I deserved better than being a family ATM. Dad never apologized. The settlement was handled entirely through lawyers. I didn't expect remorse, and I wasn't disappointed by its absence anymore. I used part of the first settlement payment to take a vacation, something I'd never been able to afford. A week in Colorado, hiking and breathing mountain air, and eating at restaurants without calculating the exact cost of each menu item. I posted one photo to social media, me at a scenic overlook, genuinely smiling. An old high school friend commented, "You look happy." Good for you. I was. Not in the constant, overwhelming way people pretend happiness works, but in the quiet, stable way that comes from no longer being crushed. My life wasn't perfect. I still had student loans. My apartment was modest. My cat knocked things off counters at 3 a.m. But it was mine. Actually, completely, legally mine. Sometimes people ask if I regret how things went down, if I wish I'd handled it differently. The question implies I was the one who broke something, rather than simply refusing to keep fixing what others had destroyed. I have no regrets. My father sent that message, expecting me to crumble, to come crawling back and accept whatever scraps of affection he was willing to offer on his terms. Rachel added her approval, confident in their position of power. What they didn't anticipate was that cutting me off was the final gift they could have given. It freed me to pursue the legal remedies I'd been too guilty to chase. It removed the last threads of obligation that had kept me tethered to people who'd exploited me since childhood. My credit score is now 805. I'm looking at buying a condo in the next few years. My savings account has 5 figures in it. I got another promotion last month. I'm dating someone kind who thinks my boundaries are healthy rather than problematic. The family drama continues without me, I'm sure. Rachel probably posts photos of Mason's milestones. Dad probably complains about ungrateful children to anyone who will listen. Mom probably still cries about her broken family, never quite understanding her role in the breaking. And I'm here in my sunny apartment with my terrible cat and my hard-won credit score and my future that belongs entirely to me. The family chat continues somewhere without my name in the participant list. And that's exactly where I want to be, outside of it, free from it, finally and completely my own person. Every monthly settlement payment that arrives feels like a small vindication. Not revenge, exactly, more like restitution, a forced acknowledgement that what happened was wrong. Even if they'll never say the words. I don't hate them. Hate requires energy I'd rather spend elsewhere. I've simply removed myself from a situation that was destroying me, the way you'd step out of a burning building. You don't stop to consider the building's feelings. You just save yourself. That Tuesday afternoon text was supposed to be my ending. Instead, it became my beginning. Funny how that works sometimes. The punishment they intended set me free. By midnight, the family chat was chaos. By morning, I'd started reclaiming my entire life. Best decision I ever made.